Have you ever felt like you're just trying to drink from a fire hose? Especially when you're trying to stay informed about what's really impacting the world. It feels like every single day there's this new wave of insights, right?
Yeah.
And just keeping up, well, it can feel like a full-time job. Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to cut through all that noise and get right to the core of what... Think of us as your shortcut to being genuinely well-informed. Today, we're diving into a really fresh snapshot of consumer trends and developments. It's from the Jill 6'25" Consumers 360 news commentary found over on the consumers.app website, dated July 6, 2025. We've got a fascinating mix today, everything from how we combat misinformation, the future of finance, even the fight against climate change. Okay, let's dig in. So our first topic, this one's from the conversation on MSN.com, and it really hits hard today. Misinformation lends itself to social contagion. Here's how to recognize and combat it.
Wow. That headline feels incredibly urgent right now, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And what's really striking in the research here is this core concept of pre-bunking. Think of it as a proactive defense. Pre-bunking, like debunking, but before.
Exactly. It's like a mental vaccine for falsehoods. The idea is to build up a kind of psychological immunity by exposing you, the user, to weakened counter-arguments, maybe in a controlled setting. It helps you build resistance before you encounter the real deal. And apparently it's even more effective when it's practiced, in group settings.
That vaccine analogy really clicks. It makes it clear. Where did that idea actually come from? Is it new?
Oh, not at all, actually. It's rooted in something called inoculation theory, which William J. McGuire developed way back in 1961.
61? Wow.
Yeah. The theory suggests that by gently exposing people to weak counter-arguments against their beliefs, you actually help them build up a mental defense against future, stronger persuasion attempts. It sort of strengthens your cognitive defenses.
So you're better equipped to resist when someone tries to mislead you. It makes sense. But gosh, it feels like misinformation just spreads like wildfire sometimes. What drives that speed?
You're hitting on a key point there. Social contagion. Misinformation often leverages our social networks. Right? And it spreads incredibly fast, often, frankly, faster than factual information.
Why is that?
Well, it's often because it's emotionally charged. It grabs your attention. Maybe it confirms a bias. And then you see it repeated within your trusted circles, friends, family, which makes it seem more credible. And that's precisely why something like pre-bunking is so important. It's about building resilience against that rapid, almost viral spread.
Okay, it sounds promising in theory, building this immunity. But in a world that feels, well, pretty overwhelmed by disinformation sometimes, does pre-bunking actually work? Are we seeing real results?
Yeah, that's the crucial question, isn't it? And the research, like recent studies from Martel and Rand in 2023, it shows pretty clearly that pre-bunking does work. It significantly reduces how much people trust suspicious messages. And importantly, it decreases their intention to actually share that misinformation. It basically trains you to pause and think more critically before you hit share.
Okay, that's encouraging. But even with this immunity, the sheer volume, the constant barrage of information online, it feels relentless. How do we keep up that defense when we're just bombarded?
That's a real challenge. The key seems to be fostering critical thinking and media literacy skills, and doing it consistently. Pre-bunking isn't really a one-shot deal. It's more about regularly practicing resistance techniques, maybe engaging in discussions that challenge misinformation. The research suggests that training programs simulating misinformation scenarios are quite effective in reinforcing these skills over time.
Right. Practice makes perfect, even for mental defenses. So stepping back, what does all this mean for us, for everyday users scrolling through social media?
Well, given that social media platforms are, let's face it, primary news sources for a lot of people, the speed at which misinformation spreads there is a huge deal. It can easily influence public opinion, even behavior. So having robust countermeasures like pre-bunking becomes really essential. It helps you, the user, better discern credible information from noise, hopefully reducing misinformation's overall impact.
And is the field evolving? Are there newer developments, maybe things that go beyond just building resistance?
Yes, actually. Some cutting-edge work involves what are called therapeutic inoculation messages. These are interesting. They're designed not just to reinforce your existing defenses, but potentially to alter existing beliefs that might make someone prone to misinformation and then build resistance to future attacks.
Oh, so it could potentially convert someone who's susceptible into someone more resilient.
That's the potential, yes. It's about shifting attitudes, not just blocking incoming attacks. Pretty fascinating stuff.
That's a lot to think about, protecting our minds like that. But okay, let's shift gears. What about how technology is fundamentally reshaping how we learn and evolve in this fast-paced world? Our next headline is from the Seattle Times. It talks about finfluencers and getting money smart, which is interesting in itself. But the actual research paired with this headline takes us somewhere else, somewhere incredibly relevant, the role of artificial intelligence in education. And this is where it gets really interesting.
Yes, AI in education is exploding. It's becoming increasingly central globally. AI tools aren't just, glorified calculators anymore. They facilitate truly personalized learning. Think about it. AI can analyze data to understand exactly where a student is struggling or excelling, and then adapt the material, the pace, the feedback, all in real time. It offers customized support.
Like a personal tutor for everyone.
Sort of, yeah. And that has huge potential to bridge educational gaps, especially in underserved regions where maybe access to quality teachers is limited. Though we also have to flag challenges, of course, like potential bias in the AI or even spreading misinformation itself if not checked.
That's a really important point, but staying on the potential for a second, how do these AI tutors actually perform compared to, say, a traditional human tutor? Have we looked at that?
We have. And the results are pretty striking. Some studies show that AI tutoring systems can actually match, or in some cases, even exceed the immediate learning outcomes you see with human tutors.
Really?
In terms of immediate learning gains, yes. The effect sizes in some studies were slightly higher for AI. Now, that doesn't capture everything a human tutor does, of course, but it's just AI can be a really effective supplement to traditional teaching.
Okay. And what about these large language models, the LLMs, like the tech behind ChatGPT? How are they being perceived when they're used as tutors?
That's another interesting angle. Research indicates educators often see LLMs quite favorably for tutoring tasks. They perceive them as strong in things like engagement, empathy, surprisingly scaffolding, learning, and being concise. In one study, 80% of the human annotators actually preferred the LLM tutors specifically for their empathetic approach. It's pretty remarkable. And it points to their potential to help ease teacher workload, too.
Empathy from an AI. That's something. Can you give us a concrete example? How are these AI tutors being used right now?
Sure. Take AI tutors like one called Ragman. It uses a technique called retrieval augmented generation, RA, basically allowing it to pull in relevant, up-to-date information. It's being used effectively in things like programming courses to provide very course-specific guidance. And in one study, 78% of students felt it had a positive impact on their learning. So they're definitely being deployed.
Okay, this all sounds incredibly powerful, potentially transformative, but it brings up that big question you touched on earlier. What about the ethics of AI in learning?
Absolutely critical. We have to grapple with challenges like bias baked into the algorithms, the potential for spreading misinformation, and of course, data privacy. Who owns the student data? How is it protected? We really need robust data privacy measures, transparency in how the algorithms work, continuous monitoring to catch and correct bias, and clear regulatory policies. Ensuring AI is used responsibly and equitably is paramount.
Agreed. And thinking about equity, how does AI help create a more inclusive learning environment for everyone?
Well, by offering these personalized experiences, AI can cater to diverse learning styles far more easily than a one-size-fits-all classroom model. It can also reach students in remote areas who might lack access to certain resources. So by adapting and being accessible, it has the potential to reduce educational disparities and foster a more equitable landscape overall.
And summing it up, what are the main efficiency gains here for teachers and students?
For educators, it's potentially a significant reduction in workload. Think automated grading, handling routine questions, providing instant feedback that frees them up for more complex human-centered teaching. For students, it's that immediate feedback, learning at their own pace, getting personalized support whenever they need it, all of which should lead to better outcomes and, a more efficient learning process for everyone involved.
It's undeniable. AI is really changing the game in education, but let's zoom out again. Beyond learning, how is technology altering our everyday interactions with, content itself? This brings us to our third headline. This one's from TV Tech, and it declares, "Content personalization gets a makeover." It really strikes you how everywhere personalized content is now, doesn't it?
It really is pervasive. And the research shows just how much impact it has on user engagement. There was one study, for instance, on an educational app for kids. When they introduced personalized content recommendations in one section, usage of that specific section jumped by 60%, and overall app usage went up 14%. That's significant.
60%? Wow.
Yeah. And interestingly, the users who benefited most were those who already had extensive interaction histories, the ones who like niche content. It shows how effective tailoring can be when the system really knows you.
Okay, and here's an interesting connection in the research. How does this personalization tie into content moderation? That seems like a different beast.
It's a fascinating link. The idea is personalized content moderation tools. So you, the user, could configure settings, maybe set up word filters or adjust toxicity levels for the content you see. A study found that giving users this kind of personalized control actually influences how they perceive the platform's responsibility for moderation overall. But it also highlights the need for these tools to be really transparent and controllable so you understand what's being filtered and why.
Makes sense. You want control, but you also need clarity. Now, beyond just keeping us clicking, what are the broader benefits of personalization, say, in marketing or customer retention?
Cool, the benefits are huge there.
Yeah.
Personalization is key to enhancing customer satisfaction, boosting digital sales conversions, and making marketing much more effective. It works by tailoring services, ads, recommendations, everything to individual preferences. This often involves collecting data like your browsing history, maybe your location, to improve branding and website metrics. It's absolutely fundamental to social media and recommender systems today.
Okay, but you just mentioned collecting data, browsing history, location. Doesn't all that data collection raise some pretty serious privacy flags?
It certainly does. That's the inherent trade-off, isn't it? Personalization relies heavily on collecting and analyzing user data, and that naturally brings up significant concerns about privacy and security. Organizations really have to walk a fine line, balancing the benefits of personalization with protecting user privacy. That means transparent data usage policies, robust security measures. It's a constant balancing act, and arguably one we're still figuring out.
Yeah, it feels like an ongoing conversation. How does personalization affect the actual web content we see, how it's presented?
It's fundamental to what's called dynamic web content. This is the opposite of old-school static web pages where everyone saw the exact same thing. Dynamic content uses your user data, your past behavior, your preferences, maybe even your current context to adapt what you see in real time. The page literally changes to meet your specific needs, which massively enhances engagement and satisfaction because it feels relevant to you.
And the million-dollar question, or maybe billion-dollar question.
Yeah.
What's the financial impact? How does personalization hit the bottom line?
Directly. Personalization is a major driver of content monetization. By providing these tailored experiences that users value, businesses can significantly increase subscription rates and improve customer retention. It helps convert free users into paying subscribers, allows for optimizing pricing strategies, and builds stronger user loyalty. Ultimately, it boosts revenue streams by making the service feel indispensable and personally valuable to you.
Okay, so from the content that finds us, let's shift to an even bigger, maybe the biggest question. How are we grappling with the major global challenges like climate change? Our fourth headline today is from Reuters, and it delivers a pretty stark warning. To win the race against climate disaster, we need to have emissions over the next 5 years. That's an incredibly urgent statement.
It absolutely is. And this headline plunges us straight into the critical topic of climate tipping points. These are thresholds in the Earth's climate system. Once you cross them, you can trigger significant, often irreversible changes. Think of things like large-scale permafrost thaw releasing massive amounts of greenhouse gases or the collapse of major ice sheets. They're dangerous because they could dramatically accelerate global warming.
Irreversible. That's the scary word there. What are some of the most concerning examples of these tipping points that scientists are really watching closely right now?
Scientists are particularly worried about several key ones. The potential collapse of the Greenland and West Antarctic ice sheets is a major one due to sea level rise. Also, the widespread die-off of tropical coral reefs, which are vital ecosystems, and the abrupt thawing of boreal permafrost, which, as I mentioned, could release vast amounts of trapped carbon and methane. The science suggests these are increasingly likely if global warming pushes past 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Each one could trigger knock-on effects.
Are there specific economic studies that kind of back up this urgency for cutting emissions?
Yes, there's ongoing economic research. A 2023 study mentioned in the source, titled Boundless Climate Disease, explores the social cost of carbon, basically the economic damage caused by emitting 1 extra ton of CO2. It emphasizes that our strategies need to consider both climate capital, like ice sheets, and how different sectors are vulnerable. There's also research highlighted on the energy, water, hydrogen, or EWH nexus.
EWH nexus, what's that?
It's a strategy focused on decarbonizing power systems. The idea is to use renewable energy sources like solar and wind to produce green hydrogen through water electrolysis. That hydrogen can then be used for power generation or other industrial uses, creating a cleaner energy cycle.
Okay, connecting this massive global issue to our daily lives, how might climate change directly impact something like energy use in our own homes?
There's direct research on this. A July 2023 study looked at Indian residential buildings, for example. It projected that, depending on the city and the emissions scenario, cooling demands could skyrocket, potentially increasing by 23 to 155% by the 2090s.
Whoa.
Yeah. While heating demands, conversely, could decrease significantly. What this really highlights is the huge importance of energy efficiency measures, especially for things like walls and windows, which were identified as major contributors to these heating and cooling loads. It directly impacts your future comfort and energy bills.
So, given these projections and the tipping point risks, what specific strategies are really being pushed to cut emissions fast?
Well, that EWH nexus using renewables to create green hydrogen is definitely seen as a key pathway for decarbonizing electricity generation. Another strategy mentioned is the reuse of captured carbon emissions from power plants. But a crucial point stressed in the research is the need for strong economic incentives. We need policies that really drive these innovations and encourage industries to adopt cleaner technologies across the board.
And thinking bigger picture again, how do these different tipping points potentially interact? Do they create a kind of domino effect?
Yes, that's a major concern, cascading effects. For instance, significant ice loss from Greenland and West Antarctica wouldn't just raise sea levels. It could actually alter major ocean circulation patterns, like the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation. Changes like that could then lead to further warming in other regions, potentially destabilizing permafrost faster, which releases more greenhouse gases, which causes more warming. You see the feedback loop. It's a complex, interconnected system where one change can trigger others.
It sounds incredibly complex. And just focusing on the ice sheets themselves for a moment, what fundamental role do they play? Why are they so critical?
Ice sheets are absolutely crucial climate regulators. First, their vast white surfaces reflect a significant amount of sunlight back into space. This is the albedo effect, and it helps keep the planet cooler. Second, they store enormous amounts of fresh water, regulating global sea levels. So their collapse leads to, obviously, rising sea levels threatening coasts worldwide, but also a loss of that reflective surface, meaning the Earth absorbs more heat, further accelerating warming. They are fundamental to planetary stability.
The scale of the climate challenge is just immense. Okay, let's shift gears one last time. How is innovation disrupting traditional industries in a different sphere, specifically finance? Our final headline today is from Forbes, and it reports on the neobank boom in Latin America, how to stand out in a fragmented market. We've certainly seen these digital-first banks pop up everywhere, but Latin America seems to be a real hotspot, right?
It really is. The success of neobanks there, like Nubank, which is probably the most famous example, comes down to a few key things. They've brilliantly leveraged technology to offer really smooth, seamless digital banking. Crucially, they've targeted the large population that was previously unbanked or underbanked by traditional institutions. Combine that with innovative financial products, smart market positioning, and a very strong focus on the customer experience, and you've got a recipe for rapid growth.
And it sounds like the technology behind the scenes is a big part of enabling this boom.
Absolutely. A major factor is the rise of SaaS software as a service providers that focus specifically on banking infrastructure. Companies like Mambu, for example, they offer cloud-based core banking platforms. This allows neobanks and even traditional banks looking to modernize to deploy new services and scale up really quickly and flexibly. They don't have to build and maintain massive, complex IT systems themselves. They can focus on the customer-facing innovation.
Interesting. Does Latin America's broader approach to innovation play into this? Is there something unique happening there?
There seems to be. Recent research highlighted in the source materials suggests that Latin America's innovation strategies often emphasize things like sustainable development and biotechnology. This focus appears to be frequently driven by public universities. It's perhaps a different emphasis compared to, say, China's focus on other tech sectors. This environment, prioritizing sustainable growth and tech advancement, creates a fertile ground for fintech innovations like neobanks that promise greater inclusion and efficiency.
And does the academic research itself give us any clues about innovation trends in the region?
Yeah, the analysis of research output bibliometric studies indicates that innovation research in Latin America is strongly linked to sustainability goals and institutional perspectives on economic development. There's robust output, especially in fields like business management and decision sciences, and importantly, strong collaboration networks involving public institutions. This suggests a coordinated effort in driving innovation regionally.
Okay, so bringing it back to the neobanks specifically, how does the unique, maybe fragmented banking landscape in Latin America shape how these neobanks have to compete and stand out?
That fragmentation is key. Because the market isn't dominated by just a few huge players everywhere, it forces neobanks to find clear ways to differentiate themselves. So their strategies often revolve around using technology to make banking super accessible, maybe via mobile apps. They focus on offering personalized products, often at lower costs than traditional banks. And critically, they tailor their offerings to specific local needs that might have been overlooked before. That's how you win trust and market share.
And what are the specific tech advancements that have been most crucial for this growth?
It's really a suite of technologies working together. Sophisticated mobile banking apps are highly fundamental. Then you have AI being used for things like customer service chatbots or fraud detection. Real-time transaction analytics allow them to understand customer behavior instantly and offer relevant products. These tools empower them to streamline operations, make engagement feel personal, and gain those strategic insights needed to compete effectively.
Right. And the big picture question, what's the ripple effect? What's the overall economic impact of this neobank surge in Latin America?
The economic impact is pretty significant. Neobanks are fundamentally disrupting the traditional banking system. They often offer lower fees, easier access, which pressures the incumbent banks to step up their own game, to innovate, to improve their services. This increased competition ultimately leads to greater financial inclusion, bringing more people into the formal financial system, and boosts the overall competitiveness and efficiency of the banking industry. It drives growth and, ideally, benefits you, the consumer, with more choices and better services.
Wow. We have certainly covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? We pulled some really powerful insights from consumers.app and that Jill 6625 Consumers 360 commentary. Everything from battling misinformation and the really intriguing future of AI in education, right through to the makeover of content personalization, the urgent ratio climate and booming neobank market down in Latin America. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. And maybe a final thought to leave you with. As information keeps flowing faster and faster and incredible new innovation, how will your own approach to learning, to adapting, how will that evolve to keep pace with all these transformative shifts?